Hi. So today I'm going to talk about my art and design final major project. I am a first year level 3 art and design student and I know what 3 of those words mean. I thought that it would be helpful to look back on if no one else is interested, for me to see how I completed my first year of college. For me to explain what I did, I need to talk about what the themes of my collection is and what I actually made for my project. I'd like to point out at this point this video was filmed before the Black Lives Matter protests started happening, and I would like to say that as I do talk about women's issues and women's rights in this video as part of my project, it would be completely insensitive of me not to mention the Black Lives Matter movement. So I will leave in the description some links for you to sign petitions and donate if you can. I was looking at the theme of connection, and in it I wanted to look at the connection between women's rights and the underwear they wore, because I was kind of linking it together, like the suffragette struggle was kind of like written into the fabric of our society to mould it the same way that underwear is used to shape the body. So I ended up making a collection of lingerie made up of 4 main pieces. So I have this newspaper corset that I made to represent the Victorian era and the suffragette movement. 1920s slip dress that is embroidered with a single secret to represent how women were just starting to gain rights after the movement of the suffragette era. The next era is the 50s, and for this one, it got a bit weird. I printed this fabric with like people's secrets on them, and I made them all blurred to kind of represent that there was still oppression. Basically, after the war, women were told to wear like bras with underwires in for the first time, which was to replace the corset. So it was kind of a step forward and a step back at the same time, because yes, they had more freedom because they didn't have the corset, but they still had this harsh underwire pressing into them, and they wore these not to make them feel good, but because it was kind of a male fantasy of what a woman's body should look like. So that's what I'm representing with this print. You may notice this print is very see-through. So I made these like weird bloomer things, and then I made a more 50s style one which has like these pointy cups. And then to make it less see-through so that I could actually photograph it, I sewed in this fabric which has embroidered on it these like secrets. This is it, and then if you pull this down, ta-da, hidden cup. The final thing I made is a long dress embroidered with loads and loads of like quotes about how it feels to be a woman, which is obviously a representation of the modern Me Too movement, and its shape of it is inspired by like the 90s dresses that they wore with like a shirt under it, like you see Rachel in Friends wear something like this. This is all hand embroidered. I feel like I just spent hours, so many days, just sewing and sewing and sewing and sewing. But I think the end result looks pretty good. So for the actual photography of it, I wanted to show the whole collection as a whole. So I decided to hang it on a tree as a whole collection to kind of show this kind of like airing of dirty laundry type thing. The next thing was to actually show the garments on a body, which was going to be a little bit more difficult because it is lingerie. I am overage, I'm 20, so it wouldn't be like a legal issue, but I didn't feel comfortable being like nips. For the photography, I decided to shoot it in a corner of my bedroom and keep the background the same for every single era, except for the Victorian one, which I took slightly differently. I took these beforehand and I did them in a forest, and I wanted them kind of blurred and like you're not really sure what you're looking at. The photography itself was inspired by Cindy Sherman, who has this really famous set of film from the 70s which is called Untitled Film Stills or something like that. The whole point is that it explores this damsel in distress narrative and it looks like a screenshot from a film. It's all in black and white, so that was the thing I wanted to carry through into my own photography. So when I was photographing the different eraed lingerie, I wanted to make it look like it was either a shot from a film or something from a magazine. I did the 50s one first. So what I did was I curled my hair, which I then set in pin curls so that I could take the pin curls out at the end of the shoot and use that hair as my 1920s hair. I'm going to do the 20s first because it was the first era in the timeline. So I had dark lipstick, dark eyeshadow. I looked kind of like a raccoon, kind of like a goth. Weird mixture. So the 1920s one is inspired by silent film stars because that's who was around in the 20s. They were the kind of role models for women that weren't just fictional characters from books. It was a kind of visual representation of the changes in society. And I just did a lot of poses to try and figure out what went well, what worked. And then I looked back at the pictures and I hated them. I actually did a thing where I took eyeliner and I wrote like negative words against women all over my arms and stuff. And I looked at the pictures and I hated them with a passion because I thought they looked stupid and they didn't convey the message I wanted. I wanted it to be like a stark contrast against the white of the lingerie, and it just looked odd. Stared at myself in the mirror for a good 5 minutes and just contemplated what I was doing. Took it all off, started again. If it conveys the message, I wanted it to explore the kind of silent films, show that it was 20s, and show the single embroidered message to represent how women were starting to gain rights after the suffragette movement, but only like a tiny bit at a time. The 50s. Did the whole liquid eyeliner, red lipstick, pin curls. Obviously because of the sheerness of the material it made things more difficult because I wasn't just be able to stand straight on and be like, here is the garment. I had to kind of cover my own body while showing off the garment, which was difficult. The way I decided to do this was I hung 2 bed sheets over the back of my door and draped them over myself. That was that. The final one was the one that I spent all of my life hand embroidering. I started out with 2 meters of fabric, which I then started embroidering, and then I decided, once I had hand embroidered like a good ½ meter of this fabric, the pattern of the dress, which I then had to cut out, sacrificing several of the things I had hand embroidered. The front is filled with lots and lots of things. The back has a single line of text on the back. The back says, "It is so rare to see a woman's sexuality, real female sexuality, either in the shows or in the clothes." Which is a quote from Nan Goldin, who's a photographer that I love, and it is a kind of representation of the whole collection because all of these pieces of lingerie were invented with the male eye in mind. They weren't invented to kind of make women feel good. They were to kind of show off this male fantasy of the female body and shape it into the way that men wanted it to be. So that was the kind of message that I wanted to get across in this final piece. Took my hair out of all of its weirdness, curled it, did my makeup in a way that makes me feel comfortable, and then I modelled the poses that I did on kind of like Kate Moss early 90s fashion editorial magazines. This was kind of like an idea of showing that women have much more of a voice, and it's like we are willing to tell stories and we are willing to be listened to. When I finished photographing this, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, the day of my deadline. I had 15 hours left to edit these pictures, write an evaluation and a rationale explaining what the whole thing was. At that point I just went to bed. The way I edited them is I just used my phone, don't have a camera, just use my phone. I wanted to play about with them to make sure that the whiteness of the clothes was the central point, because it kind of emphasises this idea that's still expected that women need to be pure. So I wanted that to be the focal point, was the clothes. The whole point of the photography is the clothes, and I wanted the clothes to stand out. And added a black and white filter to link the whole thing together, make it all cohesive. And that is my final major project done. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. Stay safe.